Today we're going to talk about something really, really important. One of the things that people do in the beginning of the year, they often come up with New Year's resolutions, and we all know that New Year's resolutions often don't stick. Well, and then most people are like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? In other words, there is lack of clarity. Clarity of what? Well, we're talking about clarity of purpose. Acting on purpose is something that most people would value if they just figured out how to make that work. Why don't people know how to act on purpose? Often it's because there is lack of clarity about what's important. And so today we're going to discuss and explore how to become more clear. Obviously, this is going to be just a relatively brief introduction to the subject because this subject is so important that we're going to have more opportunities to develop greater clarity. We're going to have a 5-day challenge coming up in just a few days, in a week or so. We're going to have a challenge dedicated to becoming a lot more clear, and we'll also focus a bit more on another subject we're not going to dive deeper into today, the subject of rock solid confidence. That's another thing that prevents people from being successful in their lives, isn't it? Well, so in order to become more clear about our priorities, we need to first pay attention to the priorities and identify values that reveal what's important to us. For most people, values are kind of assumed thing. You know, it's like you grow up and as a child you get indoctrinated by their parents, by your education, by religion, by the social milieu and the media. You may get indoctrinated into basically believing into certain values that are assumed, that are and downloaded into your brain from your environment and influencers in your life, such as parents or grandparents or teachers or what have you. We may also get influenced by the values that rub off of our peers onto us. You know, man can see, man can do. How often do kids do stupid things because another kid did something stupid? I've done it. You might have done it. And even if you don't admit it, you've done it. Probably there are some things that we can look back at and smile and say, yeah, that was an interesting thing that I did. What we're talking about is that many of our actions are informed or sometimes misinformed by the values that we did not accept consciously. If we had an opportunity to choose whether or not to value a particular idea or belief, probably we would have just tossed them by wayside. But we often accept values that are not conscious. Often we get certain beliefs downloaded into our system that are not our conscious choice of beliefs that we would want to have. In other words, we get brainwashed or indoctrinated by influencers and the society at large. Now, another important thing that also affects us is media. If it's on TV, it must be true, right? So we basically get influenced by a lot of sources that are not particularly the most savvy or most trustworthy sources. And so if we don't pay attention to our values, what happens? We don't know what makes us tick. We don't know what is important and what is not important to us. And so we often do things that are not particularly important or that do not support our highest priority values. So we may even satisfy some lower priority values that inspired or motivated us to act in a certain way. Even if those values get satisfied, but the highest priority values are not, that's not going to make us happy. We're still not going to be living our purpose. And so that's one of the reasons why so many people are flailing and floundering and basically trying to figure out what's important to them to no avail. If we had an opportunity to figure out what's really important, do you think that would help us make better decisions in life? If we clarified our values and became really clear on our priorities, do you think it would allow us to live our life's purpose? Hell yes. Those are rhetorical questions, right? So I expect you to nod your heads at least. Otherwise, I think that you're just falling asleep. So please look alive. And what we're going to do is we are going to dive into exploration of our values to identify the most important ones, to create clarity about what values we want to pursue, which values deserve to be pursued, and perhaps also demote some values that we realize, this value I inherited from my grandparents or from the teacher in the middle school, and it really doesn't serve me well. If we pursue the values that don't serve us well, what's going to happen? We're not going to be happy campers. We're not going to be served well by our own actions. In other words, our actions will not be beneficial to us. Or we just won't feel like we're acting on purpose. So in other words, again, we will feel like we are not living a meaningful life. That's one of the reasons why people get depressed, have all kinds of mental issues, or potentially commit suicide because they don't feel like their life has any meaning. And so if we learn to live our lives meaningfully, do you think it would improve the quality of our lives? Yes. The answer is yes. So nodding the head, at least, unless you want to unmute yourself and say, hell yes, out loud. Yeah, because this is like something that I'm personally passionate about. I hope you are passionate about because you're here with me and with this international community of folks, calling in from Europe, Denmark. Thank you, Aine, for being here. UK, thank you, Lucinda, for being here. The East Coast, the West Coast, Africa, Asia, I don't know where else you guys are coming from. I see some new folks joining us. So this is a community of people who are passionate about something, right? Otherwise, we would be doing something else more important to you. We are learning how to enact and enable and empower what's really important to us. When you act in alignment with your higher purpose, you live your life on purpose. As you manifest those things that are of high value, of high importance to you, your high values get satisfied. When your high level values get satisfied, you feel happier, don't you? Well, so what we're going to learn is how to become really clear on those values, how to prioritize them. So potentially some values that you might have thought were not really that important may actually get bumped to the higher level of priority, and vice versa. Some values that are not so important, they may get demoted or even excluded from the list of your values. That process is going to take some time. So we may not complete it today, but it's going to be a fantastic homework. How do we go about getting started with it? Well, let me ask you, would it be fair to ask you to procure a piece of paper and a pen? Doesn't have to be a huge piece of paper, but if it's sizable enough, that's cool. Awesome. If it's a pencil, it's quite fine too. And let's see if you can draw a big circle covering most of this piece of paper. If it is not perfect circle, no big deal. If it's an egg, I will be perfectly happy with that too. And now we are going to divide this circle into slices. Like imagine slicing pizza into a number of slices. I normally slice it into 6 pieces of the pie, but today we're gonna go deeper. So we're gonna slice it into 12 slices. In other words, you can divide it into 6, and then you can divide each slice into 2 more by just slicing it in half, making each slice more narrow. Okay, so see if you can divide it in 6 and then add additional cuts to divide it into even more slices. So you end up with 12 pieces of the pie, or you can look at it as a wheel with 12 spokes. And we're going to give names to each and every one of those slices of the pie. And the number 1, the slice that is closest to the top, like if you look at this circle as if it is a dial, closest to 12 o'clock, is going to be the slice that we're going to give a name of physical health. For some people, it's the most important thing. For some people, it's not the most important thing, but we're going to start with physical health because it's pretty essential. Without physical body being healthy, it's really hard to be a happy camper. The next one, if we go clockwise, is going to be mental wellness. Or some people call it well-being. If you don't have a lot of space on that piece of paper, you can just call it well-being or mental wellness. Basically, it's not just mental health, but it's a kind of a greater sense of satisfaction with life. And of course, if there is dissatisfaction, well, there are mental health issues that crop up, and that's where we usually find them. Let's go further to the next slice, going clockwise, and let's give it the name of hobbies and fun. Hobbies and fun, it may be music, it may be crocheting, maybe you enjoy watching movies, maybe you enjoy travel, whatever that might be. And the one after that, let's call it physical movement and sports. It may be dance, it may be Qigong, it may be yoga, it may be any other type of physical activities, but basically it's something that keeps you physically active. Let's go to the next one. Let's call it family, which may include kids or grandkids or a partner or whatever family means. Speaking of partner, we'll actually have a separate slice for intimate relationships. They're right after that. Very close to 6 o'clock. Let's put intimate relationships. All right. The next one, let's call it social life. In other words, your friendships, your social connections, maybe you're a member of a neighborhood committee, maybe you participate in some social events online. And the one after that is social contributions. Not exactly the same as social life, because we're talking about contributing to the well-being of society in general. Or perhaps you do some volunteer work, or perhaps you do some teaching, or perhaps you do some other things that improve the quality of life of other people. Maybe you creating a legacy, writing books, and teaching people through that medium. And one after that, by the way, may have something to do with writing books if you do it for a living, and that's career. Now, if you're retired, obviously that's your career. Perhaps you were satisfied with a career before you got retired. If you're not retired, if you have a career, great. Now, if you don't have a career, let's say if you're unemployed, is it possible to have career? Well, if you're looking for work, obviously that would be one option. If you decide, I want to work for myself, I want to be my own boss, well, that's also a career choice. I work for myself. Many of my students and apprentices work for themselves, so that's a career in its own right. Now, the next slice of this pie chart is finances. It's not always the same as career. Maybe you are a trust fund baby and you don't have to work for a living, so you have finances even though you don't have career. And some people have career, but their finances are nowhere to be seen. So that's basically not always one and the same thing. And after that, let's put the name to the second to the last slice of our pie chart, personal development. For some people, it's a very important aspect of life, and they go to all kinds of seminars and receive coaching and whatnot. For some people, it's not the most important thing, but they may be missing out on it. And the last but not the least is spirituality. Again, some people are very religious. Some people call themselves not religious, but spiritual. Either way, that's something that is very important to some people. Obviously, I'm a Tibetan Lama. I find that important to myself. I'm not imposing my values of belief on anyone else, but whoever is interested in spirituality often ends up working with me on this particular subject matter. So, did we cover all 12? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
great.
Mama, you've
Yes.
had a couple of people join since you started, so you might just really briefly explain this was an exercise and set them up.
Thank you, Marcia. Yes, this is an exercise in identifying our priorities and figuring
I'm going
out.
to put the list of the slices in the chat so people can look there.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant idea. That's an excellent idea. And that is also something that you can continue working with. These chats, by the way, can be downloaded. So at the end of our call, feel free to download the chat if you want. In the chat, you can also post questions. I will be holding Q&A session at the end of our call today, but you're welcome to post questions and I will be checking it from time to time. And if that's appropriate, I will actually be addressing these questions. And last but not the least, the topic of our coaching clinic today is living on purpose. So that's the exercise we're doing. We are identifying our priorities so that we can identify what our purpose might be. Now, the purpose may not be just to pursue a particular value, but purpose is often informed by the values. If our values are in contradiction with our purpose, there's not going to be any movement towards purpose. There's going to be internal conflict or struggle. If there are any conflicts between values, for example, your career pulls you in one direction and your family pulls you in another direction, well, there's going to be some internal conflict. There's going to be some confusion or indecision or procrastination happening until you realize that something is more important to you than something else. So if you realize that family is more important, then that direction will prevail. If you choose career that's more important, that direction will prevail. Simple as that. But how do we choose what's important and what is not? Well, we are going to create a list. So on the same or a separate piece of paper, I invite you to draw 12 lines horizontally. And each of these lines will correspond to the slices of the pie from 1 to 12. You can even ascribe numbers to these slices, just like on the clock dial. And so these slices basically will be following the same sequence from 1 to 12 in these lines that you are drawing. And what I invite you to do is to write a few, at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe more values associated with each one of these categories, each one of the areas of life. So it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to let you do this job. I'm going to shut up for a moment, check questions in the chat room, and feel free to spend a few moments working on this project. Wonderful. So Teja, I guess that's the way you pronounce your name. You're from Slovenia. Fantastic. I am thrilled to have you here. I was actually having conversations with folks from Slovenia who do some interesting type of coaching similar to our type of work. And that's fantastic that you are joining us today. Yes. Thank you, Marcia, for putting all of these categories. A relationship is one of them, definitely. Health, well-being, hobbies and fun, physical activity. Social life, social contributions. Yeah, okay. So family is missing. Marcia, you did great. Just missed the family in addition to relationship.
I added it in there. I made a note there.
You added relationship.
Well, then I said, oops, I missed another one.
Oh, yes. Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No
Can't read
worries.
handwriting.
All right. So as you're going through creating the list of your values, you may discover for yourself that there are a lot of intersections. For example, if your career has to do with sport, whether you are a professional athlete or you're a commentator or you're a bookie, obviously that may be an interesting intersection between these two areas of your life. For example, for me, career intersects with spirituality and personal development. So there may be several intersections. Obviously, Qigong, which falls under the category of sports and physical activities, well, that's definitely something that I also practice professionally. Health and well-being, well, I definitely work with a lot of folks, helping them become healthier and experience greater well-being. So there are a lot of intersections that ideally would not contradict each other, but actually support each other. That's somehow becomes easier with practice. I personally made conscious choices to make it so that different areas of my life would support each other rather than contradict each other. I purposefully designed my life in such a way that there would be as few internal conflicts as possible between my values or between these areas of life. Now, if you have any areas of conflict, see how you can create arrows, basically linking these two lines in your list. But these arrows would be pointing kind of in opposite directions. So there is an arrow on one end of the line, and there is an arrow on the opposite end of the line. They're kind of pulling in different directions or having some degree of internal conflict. Those will require attention, because if we don't attend to them, they will continue sabotaging you from within. And who wants that, right? We've all experienced internal sabotage over some period of time. I'm sure that there's nobody that has ever escaped some degree of the sabotage from within. However, it's also interesting to see how we can mitigate this sabotage or quit it altogether. In order to achieve that, all we need to do is to prioritize our values. And so what I invite you to do next, if you're done with creating a list of values in all 12 categories, is evaluate each of these 2 or 3 or several values in each line is most important, and circle it. So you will end up with 12 circled words, 1 per each line. That's cool. Not all of them are going to be the top of the priority list values, but they're more important than other values in that particular category. So it's important to know them. And
Lama,
yes.
Lucinda here.
Hi, Lucinda.
I can't imagine that I'm the only person who doesn't think like this.
Well,
I'm sitting staring at my pie chart, which I've done nicely, and then I've got these 12 lines, and there's just nothing happening.
nothing happening. So, for
Yeah,
example,
I'm thinking,
if you look
what?
at your health, physical health, do
Yeah.
you have any priorities in terms of what's important to you in that respect?
Oh, well, priority is different from value, isn't it?
Well, if you know your priorities, then you can dig deeper and identify why that priority is important. And that's how we arrive to values often.
Okay.
Just putting the value health in the list is kind of meaningless because it's too abstract.
Yeah.
But if we, for example, identify that what's important to me is to be physically balanced. Okay, well, that's a different story. That would be an important value. Or maybe a value of being, of healthy eating. Like some people are really obsessed about that, or just consider this a very important part of their life. So there's nothing wrong with putting that in that list.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up, because I want to help overcome any kind of hangups associated with lack of clarity. So if there is lack of clarity about how to even go about it, then there's very little progress possible. So we need to overcome at least this first hurdle. So I hope that by now you have 12 words circled, identified as a most important or essential values in each of these categories. What are we going to do with those? We're going to play with them. Before I ask you to create a list of these values, following not just the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but actually identifying which ones of them are top priority values for you, just simply imagine that you're doing an exercise. Like sometimes people say, well, imagine your house is on fire and you have only time to save 3 most important things. Well, imagine that your list of values is on fire and you have an opportunity to save only 3 of most important values of the ones that are being circled. Which 3 would you not be able to live without? Or which would be the most important values way up on top of your priority list? And following the same line of reasoning, you can identify which is the number 1. So if you could only save 2 values, which ones would those be? And if you could only save 1, which one would that be? So once you know which one is the number 1 highest priority value, now let's put it in a separate list. We're going to have a list of values, starting with the number 1 priority, the one that is the one that you could not live without. That's the one that has to be satisfied. If you do anything else in your life that contradicts this value, you will feel like I'm not living in integrity or I'm undermining myself. Or if you satisfy other values, but this particular one is not satisfied, you're not going to be happy about it. So starting with that number 1 priority, and then moving on to the second one. Like we talked about, saving only 2 or saving only 3 of your values. So let's put number 2 and number 3. Now, if you only have 3 values in your entire life, that already would be quite a bit of clarity, because just knowing that you need to pursue these things would potentially give you much greater ability to focus your attention. And where attention goes, energy flows. So you would be able to pursue things on purpose. Now, if you continue filling the list of priorities, what would be number 4 priority? Probably it's one of those circled words that didn't make it into the top 3, but it's the closest one to being included. So let's put that into the list of priorities at the 4th position. What would go into the 5th position? Obviously, the one that would be the next runner-up.
Yeah.
How about number 6? All of these need to be filled. So I'm going to give you another minute. Please take your time and complete the list of your priorities with most likely one value representing each of the slices of the pie chart, each of the important areas of life. All right. Those of you who have completed the mission, feel free to raise your hand or your pen up in the air so I know who's where. Those of you who have cameras turned off, feel free to turn your cameras on. I would love to see your lovely faces, and I would love to see you raising your pens up in the air so that I know that you have achieved this step in our project. I don't see a lot of hands up in the air. So let's take another minute to wrap it up.
Well, Lama, you threw me for a loop. I really
I'm so sorry about.
don't have mental wellness issues, but I have to think that if I had mental wellness issues, that would be my number one priority, because I would hate to be in that situation where I'm not clear, I can't focus my mind, all those things. So does that really become, because at the first I was, physical health and intimate relationships are very important to me, but truthfully, if I had mental wellness issues, I'd be hurting.
Well, so granted that you don't have mental wellness issues,
That I know of.
what would go into that list? Purportedly, you don't have any mental wellness issues. And what would go into that list would be the values you actually just mentioned: clarity, focus. So then, would those deserve to be mentioned in the list of highest priority values representing all 12 of the areas of life?
Okay, good point. Thanks.
You're welcome.
What I found in looking at it is many of them overlap so much that it's hard to give them a separate place on the list. So if I put it into a single word, like the value to me of connection includes family and social world and relationships, like all of those separate terms can come under the heading of my connection to people outside of my singular self.
Brilliant. So you may be quite right. A list of values doesn't have to have 12 items on it. If connection covers several of those areas of life in one fell swoop, so to speak, great. You basically will have fewer values on the list, or perhaps you can add some additional ones if you feel like you want to have 12 anyway. The idea is not to fit a certain number or a certain pattern, but to identify what's really of highest priority to you, and that's going to be rather unique to each and every one of us. So thank you for bringing it up, Marcia. I hope that my answer made sense to you.
Yeah, and that I think is evidence of how none of these areas are standalone. Like, to me, health and physical health and mental well-being, I would put under a bigger heading called quality of life, but also under that heading could be my finances.
Mm,
Yes, especially if finances cause stress, then that would definitely have correlations. Now, what I would say is that I normally use just 6 slices of a pie chart. So I lumped health and wellness into one category, but they actually separated physical health as opposed to mental well-being for the sake of this particular exercise. And the reason for that is simply because some people experience physical issues, but their mental health is tip top. And sometimes it's the other way around. So it's not always the same thing. But if you want to integrate them into one more kind of overarching umbrella term, sure, you can totally do that.
Well, especially if, and I think this is where we're going, if you say, how am I impacting my future? I'm making choices. And if I'm given a choice to do or not do something, and I hold up my value called quality of life, and I choose based on that thought process that will this bring me a greater quality of life or not, then when I say yes, I'm also saying, and it will not impede my finances, or it will not impede my mental well-being, because all of those things are so interrelated. So the decision-making process is what I'm seeing the most value in this.
Absolutely, yes, I totally agree. Decision making is what we're here for. So to reiterate, this particular exercise of drawing the pie chart with 12 areas of life that represent important aspects of our living, and then identifying values associated with each and every one of them, is supposed to provide us greater clarity about our values and also enable us to make decisions that would feel like we're acting on purpose. If we act on purpose, it's more likely than not that we are acting in a way that satisfies our highest priority values. When we act on purpose, most likely it gives us an ability to put more of our energy in that same course of action instead of being distracted or spread ourselves thin, so to speak. And it also gives us freedom from internal conflict, where there is sabotage or procrastination going on because we can't decide what's important or which direction to go. So what we're doing.
Sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, Lama.
No worries.
Can I speak? What is really interesting to me is because I'm retired, the whole process of clarity and decision making, you kind of turned it upside down for me, because it's very interesting to forget when I make a decision that only concerns me, that actually there is a bigger picture. In other words, I'm not making decisions in relation to other people at work or whatever. You know, when I was a teacher, it was different. And so this is a very, very interesting moment when feeling disconnected from the world and from life in certain ways, which are, I think they are actually facts. I'm shut out of a certain area of life. But it doesn't mean to say that all my values and my priorities, the things that are most important, don't come back in, but in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's just, there's a moment I've gone, wow, this is a new way of looking at it all.
Right. Thank you for bringing it up, Lucinda. What you're talking about, as far as I understand, is that over time, our priorities change as we experience certain transitions in life, whether because we change our a relationship status or change a career or achieve a certain level of satisfaction with our finances or go broke, or have certain health issues either cropping up or getting resolved or whatever. All of these ideally would need to be it would serve as an invitation to assess our values once again and potentially reevaluate our values, something that most people never consciously do in their entire lives. Who sits down and reevaluates their values and consciously decides, this value really served me well when I was a teacher or a professor or whatever, and now it doesn't really serve me that much. So I can consciously demote it to the bottom of a list of priorities because I don't have to pursue it any longer. So that would be something that would create so much greater clarity that we would not act in a way that potentially was helpful at some point in our lives, but it doesn't help now. We often end up with values or beliefs or associations from our childhood. As grown-ups, we don't have to follow the same line of reasoning or have the same beliefs as we had back when we were kids. But often, if we don't consciously reevaluate or reassess our values, we end up acting as if we are not being really mature individuals. How often do you see adults acting immaturely? That's the reason why they do it. That's basically because they get used to acting unconsciously pursuing certain values that actually are no longer valid or important in their lives. And so they just simply screw themselves up or create unnecessary strife in their lives or create suffering around them. If we don't want to create suffering in our own lives or in lives of other people, wouldn't it make sense to become crystal clear about our values and then develop a sense of priorities that would inform our decision making? And when we have our decisions informed by our highest value priorities, we can take action that would feel like we're acting on purpose. What does it feel like to act on purpose? Has anyone acted on purpose in such a way that would be like a nice example, a role model? If so, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up. I would love to hear some examples of acting on purpose. Oh, my old friend Mark Johnson, a renowned Qigong master from Northern California, has just joined us. Welcome, Mark. Lovely to see you here.
So here's an example of acting on purpose. Many years ago, looking at my life, I had 3 very young children, and I knew I had to be the one that caused a stable environment for them, which meant having a stable source of income. And up to that point, I had been rather bouncing around like a bohemian. So I made the intentional choice to go to college so that I could have a career that had the opportunity for real earning and not just waiting tables, not to demean that, or unskilled labor. It was a very intentional choice that influenced the next 40 years of my life.
Right. Excellent. That's a brilliant example of acting on purpose. Thank you so much, Marcia, for doing that.
I have an
Anything else?
example, if you
Yeah,
have
please.
time.
Yeah, if it's a brief example, sure.
Yes. 2 years ago, November of 2019, my husband and I moved from Wyoming to Montana because of 2 children and 5 grandchildren. And partly the one of the of our children had moved here from Australia. And we saw it as an opportunity to be around this family as they lived in the US. And it was a very conscious, and it just, I'd never felt like I was in the flow more in my life than during that period of time of moving and transitioning. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a great example of flow, and the value of flow is that when you act in the flow,
Yeah.
you feel like you are not struggling. You are not
No.
fighting against resistance too much. The obstacles kind of melt away and you are moving effortlessly. Thank you, Mark, for turning your camera on. It's good to see you, man. You would be the one to talk about the flow. So feel free to speak up if you feel like sharing what the flow or living on purpose means to you. Yeah, Mark, I'm talking to you, man. All right. Mark Johnson doesn't want to talk. Fine. I appreciate you being here, and I'm sure that you will have some brilliant pearls of wisdom to share. Anyone else has any other examples of acting on purpose when you felt like you were really satisfying your high priority values and things were like in the flow? Yeah, Bob, you raised your hand first.
I've changed my view when I'm walking around the neighborhood. If I see anything in nature that interests me at all, I follow it until it goes out of my vision. And I found that to be very, very comforting.
Yeah, and that must actually satisfy a particularly important value of yours. Is it a conscious value, something that you could put a finger on?
I just feel that we should observe nature more than we've ever done in the past, and I'm trying to do that.
Fantastic. So would it be fair to say then connection to nature would be the value that you're pursuing by doing that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you. Sirka, would you like to share?
Sure, I would love to share. It's always fun reevaluating your values and then looking back at your life. And that's what's coming up for me is 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, when I lived in Denmark, where I'm from, and I felt trapped and not connected to my desire and passion of what I want to do in my life, and not connected to myself or the people around me or the job I had. So I decided, I met the love of my life here in the United States of America, and I decided to just quit everything in Denmark, quit my job, store my stuff, have my brother move into my apartment, and pack 2 suitcases and move across the Atlantic without even knowing where I was going to live, what career what I was going to do. But I knew, and I can see that now looking back, that it was going to really get me in touch with my highest priority value, which is freedom, of just going somewhere else, being myself without anybody really knowing me. And it's also fulfilling my passions and my desires for music and my career, and also my connection with my family, my love, myself. So it's almost like as if that one move, or that one purposeful move, fulfilled all the values that I prioritize the most. So
Fantastic. Wow. Excellent example. And the lucky guy is here. Thank you, Sean, for bringing Sirka into our neck of the woods.
hey, thank you, Sean.
All right.
Do what I can.
All right. So what we're doing right now is we're clarifying our values. we are identifying the priorities and developing this sense of purpose. Now, as a coach, and most of you probably know that I pioneered this whole profession of Qigong coaching. My friend Mark Johnson would probably attest to that. Back in 2002, I was talking to him and to Roger Youngke about it. And that a lot of coaches talk about goals. And especially now in the beginning of the year, a lot of folks are busy setting up goals for the rest of the year, what they want to achieve or accomplish in the year. But I always look at goals as somewhat extrinsically motivated. Almost always, it seems like our goals are informed by other people's opinions, expectations, or us trying to impress anyone, trying to fit into a certain mold or achieve something that other people expect of us. So instead of goals, in my coaching, I actually always talk about dreams, because dreams are intrinsically motivated. We want to pursue our dreams, not somebody else's dreams. Dreams are also something that is often more intimate. Sometimes we even feel uncomfortable sharing our greatest dreams because we may feel like, well, what if other people don't accept us for having such a dream, or they will laugh at us, or they will feel like it's a silly thing. So often our dreams get stuffed or put on a back burner or disregarded and even disavowed. And instead we pursue those things that are extrinsically motivated, such as goals or other people's expectations. And that never makes us happy. Well, knowing this, understanding this dynamic informs my approach to coaching, where we actually learn how to focus on our dreams and become really clear what our dreams are, so that we would be able to get them manifested. It's a lot easier to manifest a dream that you're clear about. If you are unclear what your dream is, well, you may manifest something, but it may be totally different from what you wanted to. So what we do now at this stage in our coaching clinic, I'm going to invite you to spend a minute or two, or if necessary, longer, doing something that children are famous for, daydreaming. We're going to daydream, allow ourselves to imagine where you would like to be in your life, what you would like to be doing, how you would like to be by the end of this year. So imagine in December of 2022, we get together and I ask you, so can you describe to me what you managed to manifest in your life in this year? What would you like to be able to tell me? You don't have to unmute yourself right now. Just see if you can imagine visualizing it first. So it doesn't have to be something that you are ready to jump into sharing, but I invite you to create an image or a vision, a miniature vision quest. Marcia, you want to tell us something?
Yeah, I'm going to share if you give me the opportunity. So, the vision is, I've been working on it. So within a year, I can see myself being 100 pounds lighter. That is my dream at this moment, to have a business that is financially abundant and fluid, takes me places, and to have a level of physical strength and well-being that supports both of those other goals, those other dreams, so that there is no limitation on my accomplishing those things.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you imagine for a moment of being able to see yourself from point of view of a fly in a wall, and the fly doesn't pay attention to your appearance. I understand you wanted to shed some pounds, that's perfectly fine, but if the fly could only perceive your energy, what energy would you need to have in order to manifest that experience or that dream?
The energy would have to be like, I think of electric, vibrant, in motion, and self-generating, refilling. Does that speak into that area?
Yes, and you're making this kind of movement, so it's almost like this energy is swirling like so.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I think of like, atoms, they're just like everywhere. They don't stop. So there has to be this vitality of energy. It's in motion.
If that energy had any color to it, what would it be?
Bright blues and golden yellow sparks.
Wow, psychedelic. All right. So that's something that obviously can be used for helping attain these dreams. Awareness of energy that is necessary for manifesting the dream or the vision that you have is a really crucial step. Because if you keep operating on the same energy that you have today, what's likelihood of you manifesting the experience that is different from today? You may happen to stumble upon something new, but it's not going to be because of your actions and purpose. It's probably because some synchronicity is happening. And sometimes you stumble upon something that is really beneficial in alignment with your values. Sometimes you stumble upon things that actually is not in alignment with your values. So it's unreliable. It's not something that you have any control about. And it's something that you cannot take responsibility for. Now, interesting idea of taking responsibility for manifestation of our dreams. It actually takes certain gumption, chutzpah, to take responsibility for manifesting your dreams. How do you get this kind of gumption, or how do you develop this level of confidence? Well, that's something that we'll be working on in our 5-day challenge. That's going to be starting in a week or so. I hope that what we've covered today helped you attain greater clarity already. Has it? I see some heads nodding. Very good. Lucinda, you turn your mic on, please.
I've got a question. Yes, the clarity will come. There's still more work to, more pondering really. But I have a question because I'm older. That there are two things. There is the dream, and then there is the possibility. So my possibilities really are different now. And I'm sure there are other people here who might relate to that. The reality of the possibilities vis-a-vis the dream.
You asking me how to
Yeah.
reconcile possibilities versus the dream that you
Yeah.
may have that is kind of outside the realm of possibilities?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great awareness to have about any discord or any dissonance between the realm of possibilities on one hand, and the dream on the other hand. Mind you, what is possible for us right now, our realm of possibilities, is basically what we also consider our comfort zone.
Ah,
We can relatively easily achieve that, which is possible. We don't have to push ourselves. We don't have to be really creative. It's something that we just have at the tips of our fingers, so to speak. However, most of the dreams and visions that are worth pursuing are outside of our comfort zone. That's the reason why we haven't manifested them by now, is because we haven't been either able to, or we haven't found access to the resources that would allow us to manifest those dreams. So it's totally okay, normal, and acceptable to recognize that our dreams are outside of our current realm of possibilities. Now, does our realm of possibilities stay the same over time? No. For some people, it shrinks. For some people, it expands. For some people, it just kind of moves one way or another, opening up some possibilities, but perhaps others closing down. In other words, there is some ebb and flow to it. If we understand that exploring the edges of our comfort zone, or in other words, exploring the edges of our realm of possible, is what gives us the ability and the habit to spend more time at the edges of what is possible to us, that actually gives us the sense of like, yeah, what used to be really on the edge just a day or two, or maybe a week or two ago, maybe a month or two ago, now it seems to be more common. I can do this relatively easily. In other words, your comfort zone gradually but steadily expands. And what happens is we learn how to expand our comfort zone in all kinds of aspects. For example, in the physical aspect, say flexibility. Well, flexibility obviously is something within our range of motion. And if we try to move beyond our range of motion, well, we're stretching and we're basically hurting ourselves. A lot of people think, well, I should just stretch so that my comfort zone expands. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. At least for most humans, when they stretch, they end up with stretch reflex. In other words, they trigger the alarm in the central nervous system, which sends more signals of contraction to the muscle that gets stretched. When it receives those signals of contraction, what does the muscle do? It tenses up, contracts. So that is essentially the opposite of becoming more flexible. If we understand that pushing ourselves beyond the edges of a comfort zone is not a viable course of action when we want to achieve the dreams that reside outside of our comfort zone, we've got to come up with a better approach. One of the better approaches is exactly what I was just mentioning. Exploring the edges of the comfort zone, getting used to being there. The more time you spend on the edge of your comfort zone, the more comfortable you get there. And by doing so over time, you expand your comfort zone broader. It's almost like you eroding that edge, like the river eroding its banks. And what happens is that that edge of the comfort zone moves over time to envelope the dream that used to be outside of your realm of possibility. It's an elegant and intelligent way to pursue and manifest our dreams. Something that can be done in the physical body, but also can be done in the relationships and finances and creative pursuits and social life and everywhere else. We learn how to explore our edges. We'll have a separate coaching clinic dedicated specifically to that. But that kind of gives you an outline of how to get going in the direction of pursuit of your dreams. Being mindful of the edges is the manifestation of this buzzword that most of us hear about nowadays, mindfulness. But we don't just talk about it, we don't just give it lip service, we actually walk the talk. We embody mindfulness, we learn how to live in a mindful manner, act mindfully, so that you would be able to manifest and live your dreams, feeling like you're acting on purpose and you're supporting your highest priority values. So, in my humble opinion, this is an extremely intelligent and relatively straightforward approach. I wish more humans would have this clarity that I just shared with you today. Do you think that we would live in a happier world if people around us, ourselves included, would have this level of clarity? Well, that's something that is going to be your homework, my friends. Please continue working on clarifying your values. Feel free to send me an email with what you come up with. If you need my assistance with this process or additional coaching, I'm available. I'm actually raising my coaching rates at the beginning of this month. From $2,500 for 3 months, it's going to go to $3,000. And also the 6-month long coaching programs used to be $4,500. Now it's going to be $5,500. You know, thanks to the ongoing inflation in America, probably in other countries as well, I have to do it. I'm raising my rates, but if you want to work with me one-on-one, I would be happy to grandfather you with the old rates. If we get started before the end of this month, I will be happy to honor my old rates, and I will look forward to walking with you along this path. If necessary, take you by the hand, show you some pitfalls along the way, support and encourage you to manifest and live your dreams. Any questions, any comments about anything we've done today, folks?
I'm going to put a pie chart into the Facebook group page.
Okay.
Which group page is best to use?
Flow and Thrive. Flow
Okay.
and Thrive is the name of our relatively new Facebook group. It's dedicated to this particular line of work. I have a number of Facebook groups. Some of them are public, some of them are private. This particular one, facebook.com/groups/flow and thrive. Marsha is going to post the link to this Facebook group in our chat, I hope. And that's the group that if you're not a member of, please join. There's a lot of good stuff happening there. I will be posting the recording of this Qigong Coaching Clinic in that group. You can also find recordings of many other similar events in that group. And also there's going to be a pie chart that you can use for future reference. Before we wrap up, let me just tell you that I really appreciate you. You are my favorite people because you are working on manifesting the dream that you really deserve. And I'm here to support you in making it happen in 2022. Look forward to seeing you next Saturday, in 2 weeks. Not next Saturday, but the Saturday after. We'll have another coaching clinic. See you then.
Hang on just a second. I'm going to put that link in there.
Oh, please, yes. That's facebook.com/groups/flow and thrive. Excellent. Thank you very much, Marsha. Thank you, Sirka, for sharing. Thank you, Aine, for joining us today. You haven't had an opportunity to speak up, but I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Lana. I'm really glad being here too.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't do one-on-one coaching. Like sometimes our coaching clinics include somebody occupying the hot seat, and either myself or one of my apprentices would offer some coaching. We haven't done it today. We will do that in 2 weeks. We're going to have some fun with that, and hopefully I will see you all in a couple of weeks.